Hi, everyone. I'm Thiago Oliveira. Thanks for the invitation to be here. I'll try to pull back from all the advanced stage production and geomet talk into early stage exploration, talking a little bit about Oak Dam, IOCG, roughly recent discovery from BHP in South Australia, happened in 2018. So let's go quickly on this. Okay, well, the focus of the talk will be hydrothermal alteration and a little bit of the geochemistry and how we use the chemistry to help us understand the alteration zonation. But I don't know how many are familiar with IOCG deposits or with the South Australian geology, so I'll go quickly on the geological setting and a little bit of the mineral systems for that. And at the end, we'll talk on how we apply this to with few geologists as a learning loop. So if we start with the map on the left, that's it's an Archean to Mesoproterozoic geology map of the Gallo Craton in Cunnamunna province in South Australia. Oak Dam is located in the northeastern part of that craton, along with Olympic Dam and Prominent Hill in Carpatina. This is the IOCG metallogenic province of South Australia. Oak Dam was discovered in 2018. It's a historic prospect that came since the 80s, but that's a conversation for another time on exploration history. But Oak Dam is 65 kilometers southeast from Olympic Dam. Right. If we zoom in into the district geology on the right, the deposit it's hosted by the 1.85 billion years old Doniton intrusions suite. These rock units been overlain by metasediments of about 1.75 billion years old of the Wallaroo group. And these two units have been intruded and covered by the large igneous event of the Hydrothermal granites and Gallo Range volcanics at about 1.59, 1.6 billion years old. So if we go quickly, well, this is not the focus of this talk, but the reference for this paper, it's on the screen. It's Roger Skiro from 2019. It's really good. If you please focus your attention to the top or to the top right and bottom right images. If we zoom out at a craton scale, this image is highlighting what are the critical processes you need to form an IOCG in South Australia, right? So you have deep magma and deep metals and fluids are sourced from the mantle. They are channelized through a pathway, in this case represented by the boundary between two cratonic blocks, and they are deposited at crustal levels. If we look at the bottom image, that's a repetition from what I've said, but as the fluids they come up to a redox boundary, they scavenge all ingredients, metals from the host rocks, and they mixed with shower waters. And then one important thing to look at this is for the South Australian IOCGs, usually the deep parts of those systems are magnetite rich, copper poor. You have a transition zone where you start seeing some hematite, and then you get chalcopyrite and pyrite, and then that's the money zone, right? That's where the oxidized part of the system. You have a lot of hematite, and the copper species are chalcocite and bornite. So let's jump into the project geology. Let's focus on the hydrothermal alteration. This is a very interesting photo. This is a photo of the core of the system. It's very similar to Olympic Dam. It's copper bearing, and but it's a very heterogeneous type of breccia. You see clusters of the altered granites, mafic fragments, and then some banded sediments. And these all have been overprinted by late stage veinings of barite and calcite. So on the next two slides, we'll look at on the left side of the screen, you see core photos, and then they're color coded by alteration zone domains, and highlighted by in the center of the screen. You can see the cross sections, the north, south on the top, and east, west on the bottom, and plan view. So If we start with the peripheral alteration that these systems have, or outside of the breccia system, you start seeing K-feldspar and chlorite affecting the intrusions of the Donington suite. Depending on the primary composition, you might have more of each of these minerals. As you get closer to the system, you start seeing influx of siderite, and as you get even closer, that pervasiveness of siderite alteration gets stronger, and you start seeing veins until you get to breccias. These breccias can be very small, and they depend on the rheology of the host rock. In this case, we have a metasedimentary in the south of the deposit, and you often see siderite breccias in that area. As you get to the boundary of the breccia system, there's very large fault zones that 50 to 100 meters thick that has there's pervasive siderite, sericite, and iron oxide alteration. You start seeing sulfides at this stage. And also outside of the breccia, you see hematite veins or microbreccias and quartz veins and barite veins. This is all happening before you enter the breccia system. Once you get into the system, you start seeing lower energy, or the edges of the breccia start seeing crackle mosaic type breccias. You still see the primary texture of the granites and mineralogy preserved. As you end the alteration, right, and the intensity of the brecciation goes weak from edges and very strong in the center. So as you enter the system, you progressively increase the energy of the brecciation. You get multi-phase breccias, and the alteration assemblages go from those crackle breccias still with K-feldspar towards siderite hematite rich breccia on photo B, and then transitions toward the sericite hematite rich breccia. Sericite and siderite, they affect more the fragments of the host rock. As you keep going inwards, there's a zone here highlighted in purple that's fluorite rich. Fluorite comes as part of the cement with hematite and brings a lot of chalcopyrite to the system. Right, so this is usually high-grade zone. As you keep going inwards, there are zones inside that you observe lots of energy. There was lots of fluids flowing through. So you basically see massive hematite. It's almost 100% replacement of hematite. You don't really see any fragments anymore. It's really hard to log. And the contact, and this is where you have the highest grade of copper and gold. Then you keep going inside, you see the core of the system. The core is barren, right? You have a little bit of gold, but you don't have copper for a bunch of reasons that a lot of people are trying to understand. But the critical thing for exploration is this contact here is very tough to discriminate by logging. So if we go to the next. Try to, okay. Now let's try to, with that context of the alteration, let's try to dive into geochemistry. This photo is, it's an interesting photo showing that fluorite zone. You have a cement of fluorite, hematite, and chalcopyrite, and then you see the remnants of the fragments of the altered granites being transported. So there's a lot of talks today that talked about K-means clusters in principal component analysis. This is going to be a little bit of a repetition. That's the process we used, but we did something a bit simpler. We didn't go. This was a exploration program that had very few. There was a reduced number of people in South Australia. So we used a combination of principal component analysis, K-means clusters, and portable XRF to try to understand, because logging with hand lenses was pretty hard. I think for this audience, we didn't need to explain what these tools do, but I think one big difference is that the principal component analysis, it will reduce the number of variables, but it doesn't do with clustering for you. It doesn't group your samples. You're able to see the cloud of your distribution of samples within your PCAs or within your family of elements, but you don't really discriminate them in an automatic way. the K-means clusters come to support on that. It does an automated algorithm classification of the samples based on the same elements. And then if you combine both, right, you have the spatial location of those domains, but you start creating your chemical map as well, right? And you start saying, okay, let's interrogate the data. All of the colorful samples are part of the system. All of the shades of gray colored samples, they are host rocks. So you see there's a boundary here, and then we can start picking up those bigger hydrothermal versus host rock boundaries. Within the hydrothermal, when you go to the right side of the graph, you can see the red zone here. It's where you have the mineralization of the deposit, and it's related to metals. And then you have the bar and core, which is it's not related to where the copper is. It's on the opposite side. After those bigger boundaries are correlated with logging, it's always good to go back to single elements and start thinking that this is not the whole picture, right? There's a lot of variations. If you look at the core of the system, you look at barium and molybdenum, the distribution is pretty consistent, goes slightly beyond because of the 3D, and this is a plan view, but it's very consistently distributed within the core. Then you go to barium, you see that there's it's not, right? This concentration is in the northern part, it's very different to the south, and all the elements as well in association with gold. I apologize for this. This is it was supposed to be a square of a matrix, but I think we can use with the diagonal slice. So this was supposed to be a matrix of distribution of concentration of elements, or average concentration of elements from low to high. It's been split by chemical domains or those clusters that have been created with the process that I described before. These elements have been grouped into rock forming minerals, mineralization related elements, and then alteration related elements, right? And to make it the understanding a bit easier, if you try to imagine the other half of the graph, we split this into host rocks, right? All the gray colors outside of the colorful part of the system, everything that's red, orange, yellow, and green, this is the mineralization. And then the core of the system that's part of the hydrothermal system. You can see here on the mineralization it's barren in most of the metals that we are interested. There's a little bit of gold in there. So we would try to use our imagination now. The host rocks will be enriched in rock forming elements, right? There'll be a big green zone here on the mineralization element and alteration elements. Some of these elements that have been highlighted here, they refer to siderite. So you got carbon and some of manganese and magnesium. And as you get closer to the breccia system, you start seeing a bit gradationally increase on a little bit of the metals, but also on some of these alteration elements. So if we move to the center of the graph, these breccias within the mineralized part of the system, it's really hard to log. But once we look at the boundaries, the chemical boundaries, they're very sharp boundaries, right? You see siderite breccias being very different or from the sericite breccias in terms of average mineralization, but also we're not seeing here, it's very enriched in elements that are linked to siderite, of course. Then a critical difference here, between the sericite and the fluorite. You lose a little bit of the cobalt and nickel, because cobalt and nickel is associated to chalcopyrite and those breccias. And as soon as you have fluorite, you don't have chalcopyrite anymore. You have chalcocite and bornite, and then you lose the cobalt and nickel. Then we used to think that the core of the system was just a big soup of barren rocks with high molybdenum, arsenic, antimony, and iron. But as you investigate further, there are segments, there are big subdomains that are really important. Okay, that's back. Thank you. All right. So you can see that there are subdomains within the barium core where you have zones where barium is really rich, but then you deplete it on lead and zinc, and the other way around, right? So there's a bunch of ways to interpret this. We're still trying to understand. This could be different pulses of breccia. But one of the things that we notice is that, for example, on this one that has enriched in magnesium, vanadium, lead, and zinc, and depleted in barium, we see more fragments of mafic rocks in those breccias that were really hard to pick by logging. But then we go back and we can notice that. Some benefit of time. I'll be quick. I still have 5 minutes. Let's go. Look, this is. What do we do now? What next, right? After we do all of that exercise, we go back to the core and we try to use this as a learning process. Right? Why those contacts are so hard to see? What can we use out of the geochemistry that will help us calibrate the eyes to pick up some of these things? So the center of the screen, you see a downhole plot of one of the drill holes called AG32 that drilled from west to east and crossed. It was really interesting drill hole. It crossed the whole system from host rock through mineralization core, the barium core, then mineralization low grade, and then out of the system. So we could see, and then I picked here the the central part of the core, which these two blue bars, they show the contact between the barium core with the mineralized part. One of the things, I mean, these are the samples are color-coded by the clusters. So you start seeing the diversity of subgroups within this group of the barium core, of the HEMQ. But one of the things you see is there's a gradation, or you go back to element ratios or mono or single elements, you start seeing a gradation decrease of potassium, aluminum, and silica here, which is highlighting a gradual increase on iron metasomatism towards the center. But then there's a sharp contact here. Then we start infer. Well, we go back to all the graphs and we see, well, there's an increase of mafic dikes within that zone that appears to be a fault, and then we infer a fault zone, which was really hard to be seen during logging. Also, within the core of the system, we can highlight zones where there were possibly later events that were rich in barium, for example, in calcite, that somehow might have contributed to bringing, leaching some of the metal out of the core and bringing all the elements in. So I think I want to end here, but just with the message that these tools or these techniques, they're accessible to most of us, right? They're very simple, cheap. We did the whole thing with the portable XRF. This is not the portable XRF data. We used lab assays to come back and transfer the models into Leapfrog. But we had a live idea of what was happening with the program. I mean, drilling this with 4 drill rigs in a place where you don't really log that well these contacts, it's really good to rely on these easy to use and available technologies. That's it. Thank you.
I think we've got time for a couple of questions. Anyone's got anything?
That was really interesting. Thank you. You just spoke about using the handheld XRF. Did you do that in real time whilst logging? So did it inform your logging decisions as you were looking at core?
Yes, we did. We ran into a few trials and errors. I was talking to James in the morning with some elements. It doesn't work in a breccia system, right? With mineralization, copper mineralization, it's really patchy. It's not well distributed. But when you think alteration and the footprint of that's widespread, it's more homogeneous. So it was a bit easier to do while we were drilling, just increasing the resolution of how many samples you collect and trying to do systematic. But yeah, we did that. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Great
well, thank you.
Right, right,
Thanks
gotcha.
for-